There's a conversation you've been rehearsing in your head for months, maybe years. You know exactly what you'd say if they finally admitted what they did. Carl Jung had a warning about that rehearsal. Not a gentle suggestion, a warning. The waiting itself is what's destroying you. Most people who hurt you aren't lying awake replaying it. They've moved on. You're the only one still sitting in that courtroom. About 80% of people who took you for granted won't even notice when you pull back. That number should change something in you. Jung called it the unconscious running your life. You think you're waiting for justice. You're actually handing someone else the control. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung wrote, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's not poetry. That's a diagnosis. The apology you're waiting for feels like a key. Like once you have it, the door finally opens and you can breathe again. But the door was never theirs to open. That's the part nobody tells you when you're deep inside the waiting. Some people genuinely don't believe they did anything wrong. Others know exactly what they did and have decided their pride costs less than your peace. Fear of vulnerability, emotional immaturity, a story they've told themselves so many times it calcified into truth. The reasons are real. They don't make it okay. Jung spent decades watching what happens when people suppress anger instead of processing it. The pattern was consistent and it wasn't pretty. Suppressed anger doesn't dissolve. It goes underground and starts renovating the place. It surfaces as chronic anxiety, passive aggression, or physical illness. There was a businessman Jung worked with. Successful, respected, explosive. Colleagues would question his work and he'd detonate. Through dream analysis, Jung traced it back. The rage wasn't about the colleagues at all. It was his father's voice, still running on a loop from childhood. Once he understood that, the anger transformed. It stopped being a grenade and started being information. That's the difference Jung was pointing at. What you resist not only persists, but grows. Jung said that. Every month you spend waiting for an apology is a month of feeding the thing you want gone. There's a woman in this story too, raised to believe nice girls don't get angry, spent decades being accommodating while dying quietly inside. When she finally stopped suppressing it and reclaimed her anger as something legitimate, her relationships didn't fall apart. They got better because she stopped performing peace she didn't have. She showed up as herself. People can feel the difference between real and managed. Holding resentment doesn't reach the person who hurt you. It doesn't rewrite what happened. It transfers a burden onto your shoulders that was never yours to carry. The Jewish tradition around Yom Kippur actually addresses this directly. You are not obligated to forgive someone who never asks for it. But Rabbi Rebecca Einstein Shore put it plainly. Waiting for acknowledgement that never comes shackles you to the past. The onus stays on them. Your freedom doesn't. Forgiveness, in this framework, isn't a feeling. It's a decision. You don't wait until you feel like it. You decide you're done being held. I release you from my anger, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. That's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of strength. Your body keeps score too. Chronic resentment is linked to elevated cortisol, high blood pressure, and a weakened immune system. The grudge has a physical address. People who practice forgiveness, not for the other person, but for themselves, show lower anxiety, better sleep, and measurably improved cardiovascular health. Jung's shadow work asks one uncomfortable question. What did this relationship reveal about you? Not to blame you, to free you. The woman who spent years imagining the apology, replaying the exact words, the exact tone, described the turning point as sitting on the edge of her bed, crying. She realized the closure she was waiting for was never theirs to give. She stopped letting their silence write her story. I am not what happened to me, Jung said. I am what I choose to become. The apology isn't coming. Your life, though, that's still yours. Time doesn't heal wounds on its own. That's one of the most repeated lies in grief culture. Unprocessed pain doesn't age out. It just gets quieter and meaner. Jung was specific about this. He didn't say time heals. He said consciousness heals. There's a significant difference between the two. The physician Jung documented, the one whose children feared him, had decades of time. What he didn't have was understanding. The rage kept compounding. Suppressed childhood wounds don't stay in childhood. They follow you into every room, every relationship, every moment someone questions your worth. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Jung said that in 1963. Most people read it and nod. Almost nobody actually does it. The irritation is the clue. When someone's behavior hooks you so deeply you can't stop thinking about it, that's not just about them anymore. That doesn't excuse what they did. It just means your reaction is carrying extra weight from somewhere older than this particular wound. Robert Caron, who spent years studying forgiveness, put it plainly, resentment is less about justice and more about staying connected to the person who hurt you. That's the uncomfortable part. The grudge is a relationship. You're still in contact with them every time you replay the scene. Trent Shelton said it without any softening. Some people really aren't sorry. Full stop. They're not losing sleep. They're not coming back around. And the version of them you're waiting for, the one who finally gets it, who finally sees what they did, that person may not exist. You've been in a relationship with a ghost, a version of someone constructed entirely inside your own head, built from hope and old pain. Bernard Meltzer said when you forgive, you don't change the past, you change the future. That's not comfort. That's a practical instruction. The future is the only territory you actually have. Every hour spent in the past is an hour borrowed from something that hasn't happened yet. Shadow work isn't about becoming someone who never gets hurt. It's about knowing yourself well enough that other people's cruelty stops having a permanent address inside you. The most terrifying thing, Jung wrote, is to accept oneself completely, not the person who wronged you. Yourself, that's where the real work lives. Self-compassion isn't softness. The person who forgives others freely but starves themselves of the same grace, that rigidity leaks into everything they touch. Your capacity to receive warmth never outgrows your willingness to stop punishing yourself. Jung saw that pattern repeat across decades of clinical work. Growth starts when you own your part, even when they never own theirs. That's not fairness. That's just the only move that actually works. Tara Brach's RAIN technique, recognize, allow, investigate, nurture, gives the anger somewhere to go. Not suppressed, not exploded, processed. Recognize that you're angry. Allow it to exist without immediately managing it. Investigate where it actually comes from. Then nurture the part that got hurt. That sequence takes maybe 10 minutes. Most people spend 10 years doing everything except that. The Robert Enright Institute has tracked forgiveness interventions across multiple populations. The consistent finding, people who forgive report higher self-esteem, not lower. Holding on to grudges, a subtle poison, erodes your capacity for present joy and future growth, trapping you in a cycle of past pain. Desmond Tutu, who built an entire national reconciliation process on this principle, was clear. Forgiveness is not pretending it didn't happen. It's refusing to be defined by it. The pain was real. What happened mattered. Those two things can be completely true, and you can still choose not to carry it forward. Closure isn't a feeling that arrives. It's a decision that you make, usually more than once, on the days when the old anger comes back around. Some mornings, it's easy. Some mornings, you have to make the decision again from scratch. That's not failure. That's just what the work actually looks like. The apology would have been nice. You deserved it. And your life doesn't require it to move. Those three things can all be true at once. You're not waiting anymore. You're building. That's a different posture entirely. And the body knows the difference before the mind catches up. The anger doesn't just live in your head. It lives in your jaw, your shoulders, the way you flinch when a certain name appears on your phone. That physical holding is the body doing what the mind refuses to finish. It's keeping the file open because nobody officially closed the case. Hannah Arendt wrote that forgiveness is the only human action that doesn't simply react to what came before. Every other response is just the wound talking back. That's a strange kind of freedom when you first hear it. You're not excusing anything. You're just refusing to let the past be the only author in the room. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying a story where you're permanently the wronged party. It's righteous and it's real, and it will hollow you out. Being right about what happened to you is not the same as being free from it. Those two things feel identical from the inside. They aren't. The neuroscience on this is blunt. Rumination activates the same stress pathways as the original event. Your nervous system cannot tell the difference between memory and present danger. Every replay is another dose. You're not remembering what happened, you're re-experiencing it. The body doesn't know you're just thinking. That's why the work isn't optional, not for their sake, because you are literally re-injuring yourself on a schedule they don't even know about. Edward Tick, who spent decades working with combat veterans, found the same pattern in civilian trauma. The wound stays open when the story stays unfinished. Finishing the story doesn't mean writing a happy ending. It means writing an ending, any ending, one where you are no longer suspended mid-sentence. Some people find that ending through a letter they never send. The act of writing it, naming what happened, naming how it felt, does the work the conversation never could. Others find it through a single honest conversation with themselves, not rehearsed, not performed, just sitting with the actual feeling instead of the argument around it. The method matters less than the honesty. What breaks the loop isn't the technique, it's the moment you stop negotiating with the pain and actually feel it. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to move beyond a stuck position when both sides of a conflict are finally acknowledged, not suppressed, not exploded. Acknowledged. That one word is doing more work in your healing than any apology ever could have. The people who hurt you were almost certainly hurt before you. That doesn't make what they did acceptable. It makes it explainable. An explanation is where compassion starts. Compassion for them isn't a betrayal of yourself. It's actually the moment you stop needing them to be a monster in order to justify your pain. Your pain didn't require a monster. It required a person who failed you. Those are different things, and the difference matters for how you move. The Japanese call that kintsugi, the art of repairing with gold, treating the fracture as part of the object's history rather than its shame. You are not less because of what broke you. The break is just part of the record now. What you do with it is still entirely yours. There's a quiet shift that happens when you genuinely stop waiting, not performing peace, actually arriving at it. People around you notice before you do. The conversations get easier. The sleep gets deeper. The old name stops landing like a stone in your chest every time someone mentions it. That's not forgetting. That's integration. The event becomes something that happened to you, rather than something that is still happening to you. Jung's entire life work pointed here, not to a self without wounds, but to a self that has metabolized them. That's the only wholeness that's actually available. The apology was never going to give you that. Even if it had come, perfectly worded, on exactly the right day, it couldn't reach the place that actually needed healing. Only you could reach that place. That's the part that feels unfair. It is unfair, and it's still true. The work was always yours to do, not because you caused the harm, but because you're the only one who lives inside the life that got damaged. And that life, the one still ahead of you, hasn't been written yet. The person who hurt you has no hand in that part. None. The waiting is over when you say it is, not when they come back, not when they finally understand. When you decide the story has a next chapter, there's a version of healing nobody warned you about. It doesn't feel like relief at first. It feels like grief, mourning the apology you finally stopped expecting. That grief is real. You're not mourning the person. You're mourning the version of events where they showed up differently. That's a specific kind of loss. Jung noticed that the people who healed fastest weren't the ones who felt least. They were the ones who let themselves feel it completely, without turning it into a case to argue. Feeling it fully and holding it forever are not the same thing. One moves through you, the other moves in. The shift isn't dramatic. Nobody rings a bell. One day you realize you went 3 hours without replaying it, then a whole morning. Then a Tuesday passes without their name in it. That's not indifference. That's recovery. The difference is that indifference never cared. Recovery cared deeply and chose to put it down anyway. Viktor Frankl, who survived things most people can't fathom, wrote that the last human freedom is choosing your response to any given circumstance. The wound happened. The response is still yours. That's not toxic positivity. Frankl wasn't suggesting you smile through it. He was saying the story doesn't end where they left you. The people who wronged you wrote one chapter, a bad one, but they don't hold the pen for what comes next. They never did. Anger, when it's finally processed, doesn't disappear. It converts. It becomes clarity about what you will and won't accept going forward. That clarity is the actual inheritance from the wound, not the scar, the standard. You know now, in your body, what it costs to ignore your own limit. Some relationships end because of what someone did. Others end because of what you finally understood about yourself inside them. Both are valid exits. The version of you that kept waiting, that person wasn't weak. They were hoping. Hope is not a flaw. Misplaced hope just needs redirecting, not punishing. Self-forgiveness is the part people skip. You stayed too long, explained too much, made yourself small. Forgiving yourself for that is harder than forgiving them. Jung was direct about this. You cannot integrate what you refuse to acknowledge. That applies to your own choices inside the wound, not just theirs. The question worth sitting with, not forever, just once, honestly, is what you learned about your own needs from the whole thing. That answer belongs only to you. Needs aren't weaknesses. They're information. The relationship that hurt you probably also showed you something you'd been quietly starving for without naming it. Name it now, not to them, to yourself. That naming is what stops you from walking into the same dynamic wearing a different face. The pattern repeats until the lesson lands. That's not punishment, that's just how the psyche works. It keeps presenting the same exam until you pass it. You've done enough replaying. The exam isn't about them anymore. It's about whether you trust yourself enough to choose differently next time. Trust in yourself, once broken by someone else's betrayal, rebuilds slowly, not through declaration, through small decisions that you actually keep. Every boundary you hold, every time you don't explain yourself to someone who's already proven they won't hear it, that's a deposit. The account fills. The person you're becoming on the other side of this isn't harder. They're clearer. There's a difference. And people who know you will feel it. The apology would have been a shortcut, a nice one. But shortcuts in healing tend to skip the part where you actually change. You didn't get the shortcut. You got the work. And the work, as unfair as it was to assign to you, made you someone the apology never could have. That's not consolation. That's just what happened. Jung's warning was never really about them. It was about you, about what you lose when you outsource your healing to someone who is never going to deliver it. You had the combination the whole time. That's the part that stings. It's also the part that means you're not waiting on anyone. The story you tell about what happened is the story you live inside. Change the narrator's relationship to the wound, and the whole story shifts. You are not the wound. You are not the waiting. You are what showed up every day while carrying both. And that person deserves the life ahead of them. If this reached something in you, share it with someone still waiting. And subscribe, there's more where this came from, for anyone still doing the work.